hand, I hold nine bills, 9 Senate bills. That's how many they've passed over there. We are at 60 House bills we have passed. I tell you that to tell you that the Rules Committee will be very brief today.
Protest in the Senate at what they consider a lack of movement by their bills in the House. Could there be retaliation? Good evening. Welcome to Lawmakers on day 34. I'm Donna Lowry in Atlanta. More on the action in both chambers today coming up. The General Assembly is looking to address workforce issues in terms of education. There's a focus on strengthening high school graduation rates and providing financial help for college through HOPE grants and scholarships. We'll hear from lawmakers about those issues, including more about a bill to provide money to students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And according to one legislator, no one knows exactly how many unsolved homicides are in Georgia. We'll find out how he wants to change that. Also, during our studio discussions, we'll look at issues involving retired military in Georgia and what the House fiscal year 2024 budget includes for them. Joining us on the show are two lawmakers who are military veterans. But first, let's get the news of the day from our Capitol correspondent, Rochelle Ritchie. Rochelle.
Well, hi, Donna. We are just 6 days away from sine die, and not everyone is happy with the results so far. The House today tackling maternal health, while the Senate voted on establishing a unified police force for HBCUs in Atlanta. A small celebration by Representative Robert Dickey, chairman of Agriculture and Consumer Affairs, and other House members after a friendly competition with the Senate.
I just want you to
just from sine die, and not everyone is happy with the results so far. The House today tackling maternal health, while the Senate voted on establishing a unified police force for HBCUs in Atlanta. A small celebration by Representative Robert Dickey, chairman of Agriculture and Consumer Affairs, and other House members after a friendly competition with the Senate.
I just want you to know that we had a little competition with the Senate this fall down at the Georgia National Fair, and our livestock show team of Chairman Camp and LaHood and Lim and Terry England and Tom Kirby, we beat the pants off the Senate down there. So I just want to, we get real competitive with the Senate, and I'm just glad to have this trophy down in the Ag Committee room.
In the House, 3 bills passed unanimously. SB 134, which allows for a minor not to be sworn in for parental rights proceedings. SB 84 will provide financial protections for elderly and disabled adults who may be victims of financial exploitation. And SB 120, which addresses the safe operation of motor carriers and commercial vehicles. SB 46, a bill that would require physicians and healthcare providers to test all pregnant women for HIV and syphilis at their first prenatal visit, 28 to 32 weeks, and when they deliver.
This way, we can hopefully catch mothers who are infected with syphilis and treat the mother and do preventive measures for the infant in the womb before severe damage is done that will last a lifetime, and the same with HIV.
Some members questioning whether the bill tests far enough.
I've been in women's health care for almost 30 years, and I know for a fact that when we do test, we don't unisolate them. We only test for one or the other.
The bill passed 169 to 2. Also passing today, SB 128.
It affects one of the state retirement systems, the Peace Officers Annuity and Benefit Fund. And what it does is the same thing we've already done twice this year with the Firemen's Pension Fund and with the State Employees Pension Fund. What it does is it allows them to use 5% more, invest 5% more in alternative investments to try and diversify their portfolio, and everybody that's done it so far has had great success.
The bill passed 166 to 3. A grab bag of bills in the Senate. HB 142 will establish a unified campus police force across 4 HBCU campuses in Atlanta.
It also has the endorsement of each college president, which pertains to it, signed on behalf of Spelman College, Clark Atlanta, Morris Brown, and Morehouse College. It allows these specific universities to streamline operations, reduce costs, and improve communications across each campus and with Atlanta police. Just a couple weeks ago, there was a tragic shooting of a young student at one of these colleges, and so this is just to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep our young people safe at all times.
An amendment was added that would decrease the perimeter around the campuses where police would have authority.
It shortens the distance outside of university property where their law enforcement has jurisdictional powers. The idea of campus law enforcement is to protect students and faculty from criminal activity on campus. They are, under the current law, allowed to go up to 500 yards beyond campus, or a quarter of a mile. This shrinks that down to 200 yards and 1/10 of a mile. 200 yards is 600 feet, which is a little more than 1/10 of a mile. That's plenty of surrounding areas to patrol, to protect your students.
The bill passed unanimously. And 2 House bills dealing with motor vehicle crimes. The first, HB 242, would add a 3% fee on any fine received when someone commits a traffic violation.
That helps to fund driver's education. The first priority of giving scholarships to those who are first responders and to military members who have lost their lives in the line of duty to their children, as well as those under DFACS care or foster care here in our state. And the second priority is given to those who can demonstrate needs-based family income of up to 175% of free and reduced lunch. This is helping make sure we're taking care of those students and making the roads safer.
And HB 268 would provide a grant to create the Georgia Motor Vehicle Crime Advisory Board to help prevent motor vehicle-related crime.
It will allow them to meet and apply for grants through the federal government and private institutions to make sure that through multi-jurisdiction work, these folks can come together to figure out better ways to prevent theft of motor vehicles, as well as different parts on motor vehicles. There are no state tax dollars involved in this.
Both bills passed easily, but the Senate ended the day on a more contentious note, pointing a finger at their brethren across the hall.
In my hand, I hold 9 bills, 9 Senate bills. That's how many they've passed over there. We are at 60 House bills we have passed. I tell you that to tell you that the Rules Committee will be very brief today.
Donna, that is my Capitol report. I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Rochelle. Georgia's workforce depends on educated workers, and several bills are looking to improve learning outcomes. Several lawmakers are looking at these issues, among them Republican Representative Houston Gaines, who we'll hear from in a moment. But first, joining me in the studio is Democratic Representative Lydia Glaze of Fairburn, who is one of the new lawmakers. She's on both the House Education and Higher Education committees. Welcome to Lawmakers.
And thank you for having me.
So tell us about your teaching background. It's one reason you're on those committees.
So I'll be honest, I started out in finance. I actually interpreted regulations in the IRS code. When I got married, started having children, I went into education. So I have a total of 25, and that's between public and private, as well as charter schools.
Okay. So one of the bills you support is SB 86, and it has widespread bipartisan support, allows students participating in dual enrollment to have access to HOPE grant funds for certain career, technical, agriculture, and education, or CTAE programs. Tell us more about it.
Well, actually, I think it's probably one of the best bills I've seen so far in committee. And what that means is that it gets our workforce ready while they're in high school. So our 10th graders can actually start with dual enrollment, which is taking college courses for college credit. But now they can also access Hope Grant, which that grant will allow them to go into career and technical programs that will help them if they want to go into any type of field. So for instance, if they want to go in the medical field, they can actually become an EMT, and they can get their certification in that through our CTAE program. So I'm excited about the opportunity of getting our children into the pipeline, the talent pipeline, really early.
And they'll get some help with that, with these Hope Grants.
The Hope Grants is going to actually pay for the CTAE classes, and our dual enrollment is going to pay for the actual college credits.
Yeah, and I know that already passed in the House, so it's looking good. Okay. Representative Houston Gaines has a different Hope Grant bill. It's called Hope Inclusive Post-Secondary Education Grants.
I'm excited. House Bill 185. It'll be have been heard in committee this afternoon, but it's a bill that allows students with developmental disabilities who are already attending some of our higher education institutions in the state called inclusive post-secondary education programs. We have a great one at the University of Georgia, Destination Dogs, that allows students with these intellectual disabilities to come to the University of Georgia, participate in our classes, and the goal of the program is to transition these students from education to employment, and programs at Georgia Tech, UGA, Georgia Southern, Kennesaw. There are several throughout the state. They've had great success in transitioning these students from education to employment. They're great programs, but right now these students aren't eligible for the Hope Scholarship. So what our bill does, it creates a grant program that we actually have $1 million in the budget this year to fund that would allow these students to receive full tuition, just like any student who's receiving the Zell Miller Hope Scholarship on our campuses, but allow these students to have their tuition covered. These families have so many costs, whether it's behavioral therapy or otherwise, and this is allowed to allow these students, again, to go to school, and the objective of the program is to make sure these students become employed, and there's great success. I think at Georgia Tech it's 90% employment success. It's amazing. So this is a great program. I'm thrilled that we've got the bill moving along. Again, it hopefully moves through the Senate here quickly, and then we have the money in the budget to also make sure that we're taking care of these important students with intellectual disabilities across the state.
So you voted for this bill, and you tell us a little bit more about it. It doesn't have to be, there are a lot of students who may actually qualify for this.
Actually, there are more students than we probably have anticipated. There are a lot more students out with a 504B plan, and there are many with an IEP that would be able to access this Hope and its full tuition. And we want to make sure that every student in Georgia, those students who may have mild disabilities to more moderate, that they have access to a future. And that future means that they can be educated and become a part of the workforce of Georgia. We're very excited about this bill.
I can tell you're a former teacher. I want to mention some statistics from Excel. The Excel Center is run by Goodwill in Georgia. 1.1 million Georgians do not have a high school diploma, and children are 50% more likely to drop out of high school if their parents did not graduate. And you've supported a couple of bills, SB 112 and HB 313. They're basically the same, called the Workforce Acceleration Act. But basically, it's free public school for adults. Tell us about, as a teacher, what it's like to teach students whose parents still haven't received their high school diplomas.
Well, it's difficult because when we send homework home, we're not sure if those students are going to get assistance. We're not sure if that's going to be made a priority in the evening. So when we get students whose parents have returned back to school and we get to help them finish high school, it's one-on-one. They have direct instruction. They also have all the wraparound services. So if they need childcare, if they need transportation, all of that is in the bill. So we build a way for them to be successful. And I'm very excited that we're going to go back and we're going to recoup 1 million plus Georgians and put them in better paying jobs.
And that bill has passed in the Senate, as I understand. So I'm going to change topics for a moment. Because I interviewed Representative Gaines earlier today, I asked him about another of his bills that passed out of the House. It's the Coleman-Baker Act. It not only pushes for a review of unsolved homicides, but would help the state determine just how many there are in the state. The House budget also calls for money for a cold case unit in the GBI.
The Coleman-Baker Act, a bill that I'm really excited about because victims of families that have had family members that have been killed, and there's been no justice for those families, and the individual who committed those crimes are still out on the streets, cold case homicides. And so what this bill does is it has several components, including allowing immediate family members to ask for a reinvestigation of the case from the agency who oversaw the case, whether it's the GBI or local agency. It includes reporting. Right now, we don't know how many cold case homicides there are in the state. We know how many the GBI has. I'll tell you, in Clark County, the police department shared with us they've had 40 cold case homicides since 1972. And then we also got allowing families to make sure they can have their death certificate processed. That's been an issue with probates in some of these cases. We had the Tara Baker, and that's what case in Athens. That's what this bill has been part named after, is in her honor and her memory. She was a law student in 2001 that was murdered brutally, and the case still has not been solved. So this allows families to request that reinvestigation, gives us a reporting mechanism, and allows for those death certificates to be processed efficiently and quickly by the coroner. And then to your point, we also have secured money in the budget to create a cold case unit within the GBI to help with these cases, to make sure, again, this is not only justice for the families of those of their loved ones who've been killed, but also make sure we're taking these individuals who commit these crimes off the streets and put them in jail where they should be.
Yeah, sometimes we don't find out for years about those cases.
That's right.
Can you tell me about Coleman? Do you know the background on that one?
Yeah, Rhonda Sue Coleman, she was a young woman who was murdered in the early 90s. And so her family and the Baker family have been tremendously involved in this bill. They came here to the Capitol and have spoken. They've testified on this legislation, and they've talked about how this has impacted their families. And even 30 years plus later, that memory is still strong of these young women, again, Miss Baker, Miss Coleman. And so I'm hopeful that we get this bill passed to help families like theirs, to make sure that, again, justice for the families, so they can, begin that healing process, because, again, the cases are still open and ongoing, but allow those families to request the reinvestigation. And then, again, get those individuals who commit these crimes. They should not be on the streets. They need to be behind bars in jail for murder. And that's what this bill will help us achieve, provides additional resources for law enforcement, and helps those grieving families, again, to get justice for their family member.
The Coleman-Baker Act will now go before a Senate committee. Before you leave, I want us to talk about the fact that you must be thrilled that, once again, fully funding QBE.
We are at $1.1 billion being added to the Georgia DOE budget. And that means that we're fully funding QBE for the first time since 1985. We've got $50,000 safety grants for every school. We got $2,000 raises for teachers and staff. And not only that, the governor is funding HOPE to the 95%. Hopefully we can get him to 100. That was his commitment. But at this point, the new budget looks like we're at 95%, Donna.
Okay. Well, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. I appreciate that. And we'll have you come back sometime, okay? Coming up, a look at issues with retired military in Georgia with two lawmakers who are veterans.
Lawmakers is made possible by Georgia Farm Bureau. With over 80 years of helping everyone understand the importance of agriculture in our state. After all, ag is Georgia's #1 industry. Food and fiber production represents over $74 billion in output of Georgia's strong economy. The Georgia Farm Bureau legislative team works to represent producers across Georgia at the state capitol during the session and year-round. Georgia Farm Bureau, the voice of Georgia farmers.
Here's what's new this month with Passport.
Whichever way I turn, there's a trap.
Let's set this palace
on fire.
She's to be married. She is not married yet.
It's never a burden to love or give. The mother is at the heart of everything we do.
These and all your favorite shows are available with Passport. Support your PBS station and stream more with Passport on the PBS app.
Community. Learning, working, playing, celebrating, doing life is always better together. At GPB, we aim to provide you with the tools to be able to do life together well. Our mission to educate, inform, and entertain inspires everything from our wide range of programming to our stimulating radio conversations to our fun in-person events. We've got something for everyone. Visit gpb.org/community to learn more about our upcoming events.
We care about things that affect the lives of every American.
We are there at the front line
to get to the heart of what really matters in every issue.
This country has not seen this in 80 years.
This extraordinary moment in American history.
You're making such a huge impact.
Trust is at the heart of what we do.
Welcome back to Lawmakers. I'm Donna Lowry. Joining me are Democratic Representative Lynn Gladney of Augusta, an Army veteran who comes from a generational family legacy of military service, and Democratic Senator Tanya Anderson of Lithonia, a former mayor of that city, and she served in the Air Force Reserve. So I want to welcome you back both to Lawmakers and thank you for your service. We're going to talk military issues with both of you. I mentioned your military backgrounds, but I want you to talk about them a little bit yourselves. Tell me a little bit about your background.
So I am third generation military. My grandfather is a World War II era Navy veteran. My father is a Vietnam era Army veteran. And as an Army veteran myself, I'm the first and only woman in my family to have served.
Bravo, bravo. And what about you?
So I served a little more than 21 years, right before I got elected to the State House. My father is a Korean conflict veteran, and most of my cousins are either Air Force or Army.
Yeah, I love that. And I've got that background in my family. I won't go into it, though. But given your backgrounds, of course, you both have a passion for veterans issues under the Gold Dome. And I want to start with some numbers. In Georgia, adults who have served in the military account for 7.6% of the state's population. And the total number as of 2020 was about 600,000. And then it is interesting, but of veterans in the state, 6.4% live in poverty and about 800 are homeless. And again, these numbers are from 2020. So first, let's get your reaction to those numbers.
So that is very appalling. As a veteran and an advocate for veterans, it is very unfortunate that our military service members find themselves fighting for our country away from home, then have to come back and fight for benefits at home. Homelessness and veteran, I often say that it's an oxymoron. They don't go in the same sentence together. And we have to do more to make sure that our veterans are taken care of and that they have earned those rights, that they are enjoying them.
Yeah, and some of the issues they're facing are related to their military service.
Yes, and I agree with Senator Anderson. I think, some of the challenges that they face come directly from some of the experiences that they were exposed to while they were in the military. And those challenges come from either physical issues or mental issues. And once they come back, that adjustment cycle seems to, they fall behind in, their families and the whole financial cycle. Trying to get caught up again is the dilemma that they find themselves.
Yeah, people don't think about that financial struggle. Senator Anderson, you're a signer on a bill, and I didn't want to interrupt you if you want to add
I was going to add to Representative's point that the transition process is broken.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
And so to try to connect a veteran from a military mindset to a civilian mindset is where the breakdown is, and we have failed in that area, and we have to find a way to make it work.
Well, I know you two are working on it. You're a signer on a bill named the Speaker David Ralston Veterans Retirement Act. It has a bipartisan group of signers, and many are former military, and it has to do with credible service. Can you explain the bill?
So, as a co-signer on the bill, I think that this is one of the ways that we can contribute back to veterans and allow them to use their benefits as retirement from serving as state employees as well. So I think that's a great start. but it is something that we can definitely look at to make sure that we are broadening benefits for veterans. So and I think it's a perfect name.
Yeah, House Speaker, the late House Speaker David Ralston would have loved it. It is a way of, so credible service is what exactly for people who may not understand? So
credible service is anything that is other than not honorable, dishonorable.
Okay.
Because there are different categories that you retire at. It's either honorable or, general but it's anything other than dishonorable.
Okay. You both understand, as I mentioned earlier, the mental health issues suffered by people who are military veterans. And Representative Gladney, Representative Shaw Blackman received a unanimous passage of HB 414, which is looking to help not only service members and veterans, but their families too. What can you tell us about that bill?
Well, I'm really excited about that bill and some other measures that were in the budget. So some of the things that not only included in that bill just for the veterans and their families. So along with that, so included in the budget was another element in the piece. There was some funding resources allocated specifically to help veterans who are struggling with PTSD issues. And so that additional funding will offer services and clinicians and neurologists that will go specifically just for those types of issues. So traditionally, what has happened in the past is that when soldiers come back from either being deployed or they come back from assignments, there have been a lot of resources allocated for those individuals to address those physical limitations that they had gone through and struggled with, and not so much so to the mental issues. And so when they come back and we start to address that for them and their families, that helps us to be able to deal with the issue in the entirety. And so that new bill, along with some of the other issues that have been identified in the new budget, will help us all to deal with that.
Yeah, and so the part of what you're talking about, what the mental issues lead to the homelessness and the other things that people don't necessarily connect.
And it's unfortunate that we are taught, besides folks in the military, but we are taught in society, to avoid mental health, seeking mental health.
There's
an expert
stigma.
Or awareness. There's a stigma.
Mm-hmm.
And there's shame. Sometimes there's shame behind it. And most importantly, there is a lack of understanding that it is okay. So a lot of our military members avoid that process so that there's no stigma attached to their name because they had to seek help.
Yeah, so that there's this money that you actually went to the commissioner for the Veterans Administration in Georgia.
I did.
And said, listen, show me what's in the budget.
Yeah,
for
tell me
veterans.
what this money is for. And she began to explain what those funding sources would go toward, would be attributed for specifically. As actually Senator Anderson and myself were at an event about a week or so ago where she came and she spoke with a group of women specifically, where she highlighted something that she had championed, where she had designated a women's coordinator for the state specifically, where this particular individual will go throughout all 55 facilities throughout this state, where she will start to address issues as it relates to women veterans. Because sometimes women veterans don't necessarily see themselves in a space or in a role where they are eligible for the benefits and services. So once they have come out, they don't necessarily go toward and look for some of those services, and they don't seek out sometimes some of the trauma or the PTSD care or benefits that they would be entitled to. So some of that money has gone toward that specifically for their treatment and care, and that's what she addressed.
Yeah, they have unique issues, right?
Absolutely,
very
absolutely.
Specific.
And most of them are a part of the homeless population, unfortunately, and they do have families. They have children, and it's very hard to identify them because a lot of shame, a lot of disconnect is there, not being recognized as a veteran, because most people think, the man is the veteran. And so the event she was speaking of is the Women Veterans Breakfast that I sponsor every year at the Capitol so that women veterans know that they are appreciated and that we are here to support.
We're running out of time. I loved having you both on. Thank you so much. Keep doing what you're doing. That's it for Lawmakers Today. We'll be back tomorrow for Legislative Day 35. Have a good night.